The Powers Project.
Hi, Kurt.
Ralph, how are you, sir?
Doing fantastic. I'm
Excellent.
excited to be on the Powers perspective today because I have some questions for you that I think you could shed valuable insight on with uncommon sense relative to what's happening in the world today. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I'm looking
All
forward
right.
to it.
So I'm going to ask you a question, and I have no experience with trans people. Yet what I see them being is a target, a political and cultural target today in the world we live in, which is a sad state of affairs. And given what your experience is with different sexualities and stuff, I'd like your perspective on the following. Right now, there's a movement to have trans, let me get this right, ladies who are trans who used to be men involved in women's athletics.
Right.
And it's become, if you go back to what happened at CPAC in Orlando a couple months ago, this is now a talking point of why our society is degrading and all this other stuff. So that's part one. Part two is with Caitlyn Jenner out in California running for governor. Okay. And the pushback she's getting because, again, she's part of the trans community and she's very high profile. So what's your perspective on trans women in women's athletics and Caitlyn Jenner running for governor? What's your perspective, Kurt?
Okay. Let me start with Caitlyn Jenner. Okay. Obviously, I don't know Caitlyn Jenner personally, so people might go, "Well, who are you to form opinions about Caitlyn Jenner?" My opinions are formed based on well before she became Caitlyn Jenner. I knew her when she was Bruce Jenner. I was around when Bruce Jenner won the gold medal in the decathlon in 1976. I watched him do it. He was a hero of mine. It was my issue started shortly after that because I found that his behavior constantly in the public eye, he was all about himself. He was an attention whore from back in those days. He just would say and do anything to have attention on him. He's, I'm not a psychologist and I'm not going to pretend to be one, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone said he's a narcissist or at least borderline narcissistic. Not at all. In fact, I'm sure it's pretty accurate. With that being said, I go by what his or her words are now and what she says now, what he said back then, his actions back then, her actions now. And that's where I form my opinions. It's not off of news because I'm not going to go off on this tangent, but all news media is slanted. And the more they say they aren't, the more they are.
Absolutely.
So if I lean left, I'm not going to hear anything but bad things about Caitlyn Jenner because she has taken stances that go against what the left believes she should do. So, what I found is that you have people like, Joe Rogan, for instance, who I happen to love, but the left has gone against him and the right has gone against him because he had the audacity to have people on both sides speak to them in a civil manner and call out the truth, regardless of where that truth, fell, whether it fell on the left or the right. He was willing to do that, and neither side likes that. So they'll call him, whatever position he takes, they'll call him on that side. So they'll say, "Oh, you're a right-wing nutcase," or "You're a left-wing nutcase," depending on what his opinion is. And what we see is this bottom-feeding journalism going on, even with people that you think are above that, and they just take the easy way out, and they're doing it for views. They're doing it for money, because they know if they say things that are going to be sensational, if they attack Joe Rogan, people are going to listen to them, whether they like them, what they have to say or not. People are going to listen to him. So he becomes a target, and Caitlyn has become a target.
So do you think Caitlyn's become a target because previously as Bruce, from what I understand, he was on the Republican side of things?
Well, yeah, that's why he's a target on the left, and that's why
Right.
that's why she is now a target on the left.
So
And
so now he was a Republican before,
mhm,
and now she is a trans person,
who's
and
also
she's
a
the
Republican.
target on the right. So you talk about him and the sandwich. That's kind
Right.
of she can't win like from either side of the spectrum.
Well, again, let's not get it twisted though. I don't have any sympathy for Caitlyn. I again, I've said I've judged her by her actions and her words, and she hasn't been the nicest person. I find her to be vile. I find her to be opportunistic, and again, will say and do anything to garner attention, and she's not always right. But here's the thing: she's not always wrong. And just because I don't like her doesn't mean I can't agree with what she says. Just like I love Joe Rogan, but I don't always agree with what Joe Rogan says. So it's okay to have difference of opinions, regardless of whether you like someone or don't like them.
All right. So given this argument or this discussion today about men becoming trans women competing in women's athletics, do you think Caitlyn Jenner saying she's going to run for governor is benefiting the trans community, or is it again? I look at her; she's got sights on her from both sides. Okay,
Right.
looking to shoot her down. Do you think she's giving the trans community an opportunity, or is her visibility now, especially in light of what the conservatives and Republicans are doing to shut down trans women and women's athletics? Do you think she's causing more harm?
I don't think she's causing harm to the trans community at all, not in this particular instance. That's not to say she hasn't done so in the past. I'm saying in this particular instance where she's calling out men who become female and want to participate with other biological females in a sport that they have just an incredible advantage over biological women. And she's just calling that out. She's not the only one to do that. Martina Navratilova, who was beloved in the LGBTQ community, they called her transphobic because she said this is unfair. But that trans athletes should not be allowed to compete against biological females. Trans females shouldn't be allowed to compete against them. And what you find is this. And here's the thing: whenever you disagree with them, they automatically resort to name calling. As you know, I had said something to Jonathan Van Ness one time about his behavior and that I wasn't a big fan of his. He automatically said that I was homophobic. And of course, his fans called me homophobic and that I have self-hatred and all this other nonsense. And I go, you're a hairdresser, you're not a psychologist, and you didn't even listen to everything I said. And yet you've already determined I'm homophobic. And this is what happens. Anytime someone speaks out against the extremists or these activists, who I want to point out, the majority of the time, they're not trans. They're not trans. They don't, the trans community doesn't believe the nonsense that they're pushing.
So where do you think? Okay, so let's back up to Caitlyn Jenner here. When she was Bruce Jenner, back in the mid '70s, won all the gold medals, the face of Wheaties and all this stuff, and just like me, like that, you want to be like Bruce Jenner. I mean, that was the athletic accomplishment. Okay, so now Bruce has transitioned over to Caitlyn, and she is saying women who transition like he has should not be doing strictly birth gender women's athletics because they have an unfair advantage, right?
Biological females, yes.
Biological women. Okay. So because he's in that position of saying that, especially given his experience, he's being repressed by the people who should be saying, well, wait a second. If there's anybody who could speak on this subject, it would be her.
Right. Except what you do is, again, you have these activists and these extremists. The first thing they do is they try to shut you down. So they'll call you a name. They call you transphobic. They say you have self-hatred. They'll call you whatever names will fit their cause. They'll call you that. Just like Jonathan Van Ness called me a homophobic, or I had self-hatred because I didn't like the way he does certain things. So I'm automatically homophobic because of that.
So Bruce Jenner is transphobic.
Right. Even though Bruce Jenner
Caitlyn
is
Jenner is
trans,
transphobic because of that.
right, and exactly, and Martina Navratilova, who's a lesbian, she's transphobic because she called him out on this, and
Because she is an athlete too. Going, wait a second.
right,
If men who are super tennis studs all of a sudden want to become trans and transition to a woman, they'll have an advantage. Is that her perspective too?
yes, and anybody who's ever played sports, that's their advantage, that's their perspective. Because as someone who's done sports my whole life, I can tell you it's not even close. In fact, I remember an interview with Chris Everett back a long time ago when she was married to her husband Lloyd, or his last name was Lloyd, and Lloyd wasn't even ranked in the top 100 in men's tennis, and she said, he destroys me. Now this is a time when Chris Everett was ranked number 1 and number 2 between her and Martina Navratilova as the best women tennis players in the world, and she goes, if he doesn't want me to, I couldn't even score a point on him. It would be lucky if I scored a point. That's how much difference there is, that you have the number 1 or number 2 woman tennis player in the world who couldn't score a point against some guy who's ranked 100 and something in the men's. And what happens is these activists and these extremists, and again, I need to point this out over and over again because I don't think people understand, especially straight people who don't have contact with trans people. This is not the trans community speaking. These people do not speak for them. The trans community doesn't want them to speak for them, and they don't believe the bullshit that they're putting out there. They don't believe it because they know it's not true. And anybody who I had this discussion with supposedly 2 female biologists, okay? And I said, then answer me one simple question. There's 2 sexes, and and there's a small percentage of people who are intersex that has both genitals, okay? But even among the intersex people, they know that they see themselves as being female or male. So there are 2 sexes and only 2 sexes. So when you have someone who's supposed to be a biologist and she says trans females have always been biological females, I don't know where you got your biology degree, but you're crazy. You're deliberately lying. If you're a biologist, you're deliberately telling the lie because you know that's not true.
Well, isn't transsexual meaning you're taking whatever you're given for when you popped out of the mother's womb, saying, well, at some point in my life, I mentally and physically feel a different sexual orientation, and then you transition to whatever that is you're supposed to fit in, right?
They feel as though they're a different sex. That's what they feel. So here's the thing. It's like if a trans female has always been a biological female, what's the need for transitioning then? And I asked her that, and crickets, because it was like it made too much sense to her. Because again, these people are not concerned with what happens to trans people. They're concerned with pushing an ideology, and they do not care who gets hurt in the process. And unfortunately, the majority of people who are going to get hurt are going to be trans people because they're bullshit.
All right. So in this mix, here you go. You have Bruce Jenner becoming Caitlyn Jenner. You have Martina with her perspective, both highest level athletes. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they're saying women who are now women who used to be men have a competitive advantage in athletics against other women, right?
Right.
Okay. So then where is the push to say, okay, we're going to push trans women into women's athletics, because what's the win they're looking for? I'm lost in this whole thing myself.
Okay, so the win is that they're looking to pretend as if there are no differences between male and female. That's it. It's an ideology that they're looking to push, that they want people to buy into. When you have a straight woman who gets on YouTube and says, if you don't date a trans female and you're male, then you're a transphobe. It's like, no, this
No,
is it's this kind of mentality of calling people transphobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, misogynistic, whatever it is that they're pushing. They want to shut you down by calling you a name. So now what happens is you go on the defensive. You go, I'm not transphobic, I'm not homophobic, I'm not, and you instead of making the valid points that you have, they have you on the defensive trying to defend yourself the whole time.
so let me give you a perspective on that. So I am equal opportunity for everybody. Okay.
Yes.
And I also believe, because of having experienced athletics growing up, that a male, born male, is going to have an advantage over women in almost any physical capability.
Once they hit puberty, yes, because
Right.
here's the biological facts. Women have 1/3 of the testosterone levels that men have. Now, they try to downplay that, and you can't. There's a reason why sports, professional sports, college sports, high school sports, why they'll kick you out of the sport if you're caught taking steroids, taking testosterone, because it gives you an unfair advantage. So to ignore that fact that women have 1/3 of the testosterone that men have and say that's not an advantage, you're living in a fantasy world, or you're just being disingenuous and you're lying to push your narrative. And that's all it's about.
So I would say, from my perspective, that a woman who transitions to become, a man who transitions to become a woman who wants to compete in women's athletics, the category itself, I say, to me, that doesn't work. So I'd be labeled a transphobic person.
Yes.
Because of my logic going, knowing what men's design are and what women's design are, they're two different things. Okay. Yet I say, at the same token, when somebody wants to transition from being a man to a woman, or a woman to a man, other than for athletics, I'm all for it. If that's what makes you the whole person that your body and your brain and your physiology says you are, good for you. Make the move, right?
Right.
Okay. So then I wouldn't be a transphobe if I had that perspective.
Except they'll still call you one.
Because I believe when it comes to the athletics part,
right.
It doesn't work.
Buy into their ideology 100%, then you're transphobic. And again, this isn't the trans community. These are the extremists and the activists who aren't even trans themselves.
All right. So the activists promoting and pushing somebody who trans into a different sex should be going into athletics. Sets up, and this is again from Ralph Rise's perspective, sets up the other side of the coin to be in a position to repress trans completely, because they go, yes, you're not allowed into athletics for women, and therefore anybody who's trans is going to come off as abnormal. And they're pressing that perspective.
Right. Exactly, because they want you to think of as that trans female as a biological female. That's what they want you to think. But even again, males who transition to females, the ones I've seen and known, they go, no, there is a biological difference. We realize that. We know that there's a difference, and they won't go out of their way. Like, for instance, let me tell you just a little backstory, because there are people out there who are predators. There are people out there who are taking advantage of this. I don't remember his or her name, and I don't even want to call him a her because it's bullshit. But this guy claims to be trans. He hasn't had any surgery, hasn't had any hormones. He's thrown a cheap ass wig on his head and put on some lipstick really badly. And
he's a crossdresser.
And that's basically what he is. But what he did was he's in Canada. He called up to get a waxing done. Now, mind you, he still has his cock and balls. And he's upset because these women at this waxing place don't want to give him a waxing job because he still has cock and balls. And so he's like, I'm a female. No,
Well, no, he's
you're
not.
not. It may be in your head, but real trans people would never do that. They would never put people in an uncomfortable position because they know that it's, you know, it's that no matter how they feel, they know what they still have, and they wouldn't want to put people in an uncomfortable position. But predators like that, they're out to make a name for themselves and to prove a point. So in Canada, these businesses ended up getting shut down because of this jackass. And it's because,
Because they wouldn't provide a service that he's saying, I'm a woman, therefore you discriminate against me. I'm trans, even though I'm not actually trans.
right, exactly. He's using the trans community as an excuse for his deviant behavior because he's not trans. And I don't care what he says. And I don't care what Canada says, because that's the thing. Canada has gone so extreme that they've actually had these businesses shut down because of his assertion that he's trans, and they won't service him because of it. And to me, I just find that abhorrent. I find that a total misuse of a community to benefit yourself, to make a name for yourself.
Well,
it's
how does that's like a parallel to what goes on with the, here with the gay rights movement. If you remember a few years back, it still goes on, where somebody's getting married and they go to the cake lady up here in Georgia and she says, oh, I'm not going to make you a cake because you're gay or you're a lesbian. And then the lady who wouldn't certify a marriage license, I think it was up here in Georgia or Kentucky or Tennessee or something, that said, oh, I will not do my job as a clerk because I'm against this stuff. Doesn't this kind of fall into the same repressive mentality, either side of the coin?
That's a question, but no, it doesn't. And here's why. When a baker says, I'm not going to bake you a cake for your wedding because I'm a homophobe, and that's what he's saying, okay, he's acknowledging the fact that you are two gay people. You're not two straight guys playing gay. You're really two gay men who want to get married. This guy is playing trans. He's not trans. And so he's wanting these businesses to do something that they won't do. So they don't service other men. They don't give waxes to other men. It's not like he's being discriminated against, but in his mind, or what he's trying, this little bullshit he's trying to pull is saying, oh, and let me state this before we go any further. Everything that I'm saying is my opinion. It's strictly my opinion.
Your power's perspective.
The power's perspective. It's my opinion. So, you can think whatever you want. You can think this guy's trans. That's, great for you. You couldn't convince me because I can see by his actions. And again, that's how you judge people, by their actions. And this guy is showing that he is no more trans than I am, or you are.
All right. So I know this. You're not transphobic, nor am I. Okay. And yet there's a lot of people out there who have no understanding of what the basis of what we're talking about. The general population, the conservatives out there, the religious people, the Republicans, all stuff are using this as a wedge. So you're saying on one side, you have activists who are hurting the trans people by pushing this equality agenda when it comes to women's athletics, which feeds this other side of the coin that says, oh, yeah, they can't be in athletics either because it doesn't work. Give me an example that you could come up with that would say, hey, everybody, let's talk about some maybe famous people today that if you said they transitioned, it absolutely proves the point of why this is a bad argument on both sides.
Okay, I'll do that. But let me say this first, because I want to point out something you made me think of something. The problem that's going on right now is caused by two entities. One are the activists and the extremists, and the other is the media. And even the media that you would think would report on this properly, they don't. You take people like Brian Tyler Cohen or Rick Strom from TYT, the Young Turks, and I listen to them and I go, you guys bought into this bullshit, and now you're and what they're doing is, like Rick Strom posted on his little video that he did, he showed Joe Rogan like a 5-second snippet saying something about trans people and calling Joe Rogan a transphobe and hating trans people. And they go, that's not what Joe Rogan said. And had you played the whole thing, you would see that Joe Rogan says, I'm for everybody to have, to be love and peaceful and do whatever you want to do. He's not transphobic in the least bit, but Rick Strom, being disingenuous with his narrative, posted a 5-second, snippet of Joe Rogan, making it try to look like he's transphobic. And Brian Tyler Cohen, same thing. What they do is they'll pick apart, like they'll try to say, oh, these are fringe, matters. These aren't even things that should be brought forth. Bullshit. What are you saying that you should, because they had this West Virginia governor on and this journalist who they said, oh, she fried him or whatever. No, she didn't. She goes, why did you make it a priority? He goes, I didn't make it a priority. It came across my desk. I happened to agree with it and signed it, like like hundreds of other bills I signed. But they tried to make like, oh, he went after. I go, if you really wanted to find out who presented the bill, that's who you should ask. Why is this a big deal to you when we have unemployment, when we have, however many millions of people without health care, when we have all these other problems? Because they want to paint a picture of it or world. It's like you can't take care of those problems and this problem. Now, with that being said, yes, the right is using this, but that doesn't mean it's not a problem. So what they're saying is like, oh, there's only 17 trans kids in West Virginia, so how could this even be a problem? So let me give you a scenario. Fallon Fox, who is a male who became a trans female, is an MMA fighter. He cracked the skull.
A male.
Yes.
That transitioned to a female.
Right.
In MMA.
In MMA.
Okay.
Had an opponent that he fought and cracked her skull. Now, tell me how that's not an advantage. Tell me how
he has a total advantage.
How is it that you're a nobody when you're a man in men's sports and all of a sudden you become world champ, you break world records? That's proof right there that there's distinct advantages to having hit puberty as a male than when you don't. And the problem is like you say there's no problem. So should we wait until a trans female decides that they want to wrestle females in high school and cracks a girl's skull open in high school before we can say, oh, now it's a problem? Their argument doesn't hold water. It's just like.
All right, so I'm going to ask you this question. You brought it up, okay? So you wrestled, my son wrestled, and when he wrestled, there was a girl on a wrestling team that she wrestled against the boys, and she kicked ass. Okay, now keep in mind, these are middle school into high school kids, okay? Given that what you just said is with their natural born physiology, she's motivated to go wrestle for whatever she likes or whatever it is she makes her feel good, and she's strong, confident, and powerful. Should that be allowed, where you actually have, co-ed sports, basically, if you want to call it that? I mean, is that any different than having a trans person participating in a male sport or female sport?
Sure, it's a world of difference. Most of the co-ed sports that we have are non-violent sports. And they're also sports where you play as a team. So it's not like, oh, volleyball, you have all boys on this side, all girls on this side. That's not co-ed sports. Co-ed sports saying that you have both sexes on both teams. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the majority of co-ed sports that are played are before these kids hit puberty. And number three, if this particular female happens to have more testosterone than the average female and she's able to compete against males her own age, and she's one of those anomalies. Listen, I was in the military, and I'm going to tell you, there were a couple girls out there who could kick the guys' asses, and I was impressed with them because I was like, if I go to battle, that's who I want on my side, not these guys who can't keep up with us. So if a female, she doesn't have distinct advantages by being female. So if she can elevate herself to that level and play in men's sports, good, I'm all for it. But when you have people who have distinct advantages playing down so that they can dominate. That's intrinsically wrong. To me, it is. It's just unfair, and I don't see. It's like college students playing high
Junior
school,
high school kids.
or it's not gonna be fair no matter what. So
Okay, so that's a great analogy. It's almost like even if you took men's sports and you said if a high school team composed of juniors and seniors played against a middle school team composed of seventh and eighth graders, the eighth graders would get destroyed every time.
exactly,
All right,
because there's a distinct
advantage.
physical advantage.
Right,
Exactly.
physical advantage. Right. All right. So you mentioned that wrestler earlier. I don't follow MMA. Who's a famous athlete that everybody would know around the world today that you could say, listen, if this person woke up tomorrow and transitioned, this proves the point of why it's not a good.
So you could take someone like LeBron James, or take Mike Tyson. You could give them all the hormones in the world, and you could give them all the surgeries in the world, and there's not one female who would even come close to be able to compete against either one of them. And just because they all of a sudden, if LeBron James woke up tomorrow and said, I identify as a female, and went to play in the WNBA, he could destroy the teams by himself. Honestly, they wouldn't be able to compete against him. And there isn't a woman on the WNBA who would pretend like they could, because they know they can't. Because why? Because they're biological women, and they know that men have a distinct advantage over them physically. But these extremists and these activists want you to believe that doesn't exist. But here's the thing, because they'll say, oh, well, you're taking the extremes. You're right. I am. LeBron James, Mike Tyson, top of their game. There's many men couldn't compete against them. So let's just take a boxer who's ranked in the top 100 in the world, or less than 100 in the world. There's not a female boxer in that weight class who could compete against them. Even the best would not be able to compete against them, because they're too fast, they're too strong, and too powerful. And for these idiots to lie about this and put biological women in danger. And here's the thing that's so ironic, is that the LGBTQ community is always very proud of the fact that they always support women. It's always about women's rights and believing the woman and all that, unless it's a trans woman's rights over a biological woman's rights. And then it's like, oh, well, we don't care about biological women anymore.
That's a great perspective. I mean, that is a great perspective right there.
So one of the things I wanted to say is that when you're disingenuous with your argument like they are, all you have to do is sit back and listen to what they're doing, because they're very slick in how they present their message. So for instance, when Brian Tyler Cohen, and again, I don't think Brian is a bad person. I think he gets wrapped up on his side of things, and he only sees it from one perspective. And this is why I've talked about this a million times. It's so important to look at this from all different perspectives and not just yours, because you're not going to see the whole story, and you're not going to see the whole truth if you don't. So Brian gets caught up in his perspective of things, and he'll say, but he says things like, oh, this is a fringe matter. It's not even worth looking into. But he's wrong, because the left will tell you about how billionaires don't pay taxes and how that's such a problem. But the truth is that there are so few billionaires, and whether they pay taxes or not isn't going to fix our economy. It's not going to get us out of the trillions of dollars of debt that we owe to China and everybody else. So that's a fringe matter if you want to look at it. But they don't have any problem continuing to bring up that fact that Jeff Bezos doesn't pay any taxes.
So when it comes to the trans community, okay, this is a question I would like to know. So on both sides of the coin, you're having people squeeze this trans community into this athletic performance. How many people are actually sitting there going, I think I want to transition so I can go into women's athletics and dominate the field? Or what part of the motivating factor you think it is to say, I want to become a super athlete being a woman?
Right. I think it's a small percentage, but unfortunately, it's that small percentage that's getting all the notoriety and pushing their cause because they want to really, like, you were a man and you honestly you go into powerlifting and you weren't anybody in the powerlifting world in the men's category, but because you become a woman, you honestly think you did something when you know damn well you have 2/3 more testosterone than any female that you competed against. Do you really think that's fair? Do you really think that you earned a world championship or earned a world record?
So when you say something like that, when I'm one of the extremists that says, "Oh, I'm all for trans people, therefore Kurt Powers is a freaking transphobe,"
Yeah.
okay, what I look for is what's the win-win here, and I just don't see it because from that perspective, you're taking logic out of the mix, okay, science and logic, and then on the other side of the coin, you have people who don't believe in science and logic anyway, giving them
Right.
a wedge.
And
You're
here,
giving them something to work against you on.
so here, you make a good point. So here's something I want to say. The people on the left, and that's who these people are, these activists and these extremists, they would always comment about how Trump supporters ignore science.
Right.
Yet it's convenient for them to ignore science when it's something they want to push. And that's exactly what they do. And so what they do is they have these professional smear artists, and they come out and they start by calling you names. They attempt to humiliate you into silence by saying, "Oh, it must be nice from your position of being a straight white male and all the privilege that you have to speak on something that they want to silence." Like, if you're straight white and male, you're not, according to them, you don't have a right to speak about anything. And it's just their way of shutting you down, because if they can keep you quiet, then that's one less voice they have to defend their ridiculousness against. And that's
Well, here's the thing. I happen to be straight. I happen to be white. And I'm absolutely a male that loves women. Okay. So here's the thing I'd say, though. That argument is a false pretense argument because
of course it is. But
you're trying to box people up into a box and say, we're going to move you out of the way because you're not agreeing with us, as opposed to what we're doing right here, which is have a clear understanding of some science. And you're right.
they don't want that.
You could tell the Republicans, well, you guys don't follow science. And when they actually are, then it makes them transphobe.
Yes.
And here you're saying we need to follow science for climate change and everything else, yet I don't want it to apply here. Interesting. So
Yes.
What is your summarization of this whole thing? Where does it need to go to become worthwhile for everybody instead of detrimental?
Okay, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to shut down the extremists. And I don't mean shut down their voices. Let them talk. I want them to talk. I want people to see how stupid and ridiculous their statements are, and just sit back and listen to what they're saying, and then go do the research yourself. If you don't know biology 101, go learn it. And then you'll see that these people are talking out of their asses. But don't let them scare you into silence, because they will. They'll try to they'll assassinate your character if they can. And once they do that, once they quiet you, then it's through legislation that they try to get passed to make it so that you can't discriminate, as what they would call it, discriminate against trans athletes, because they'll get the laws passed so that they can participate, that trans women will be able to participate with biological females. And that's their goal. Their goal is to shut you down, shut your mouth, and then get the legislation passed. And that's how they've always done it. But again, they've learned from the right. The right does the same damn thing. It's no different. And this is the irony of it as well, is that when the right, especially the religious right, back years ago, would try to shut gay people down, try to humiliate them, try to assassinate their character, and then pass legislation so gay people can get married and stuff, the left was up in arms about the tactics they were using. And now here they are using the same exact tactics, being the hypocrites that they are. And again, I need to say this again and again. This is not the majority of the trans people or the LGBTQ people. These are mouthy people or extremists and activists who apparently have more free time than the rest of us do. because they seem to be everywhere all the time, and they're doing it for no other reason than to push their ideology, and they do not care who they hurt in the process. One of the things I want to say is this. When someone comes at you, and you see this on Facebook all the time, you make a valid point, and the first thing they do is they start name calling. They don't even try to attack your argument because they know they can't. So they just call you names like transphobe, homophobe, whatever.
That's always been that way, though, Kurt. People,
Socrates said, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tools of the loser. And that's exactly what they are. They have nothing to base their argument off of. So when you call people out, if you ask them a question, because I seriously, when these two female biologists, I said, I would love to have a discussion with you. Can you dispel what Dr. Soul or Dr. Bradley, who are both female biologists, can you take their work, and can you discredit their work? If you can, I'm all ears. I want to listen to what you have to say about it, because I'll look into it. Neither one of them answered me at that point, because again, they know that the nonsense they're pushing is not based in science, and it never will be. And it doesn't matter how hard they push. One of the things I wanted to add is this. There's a YouTuber. Her name is Blair White. She was male who transitioned to female. And I don't normally do this, but I would say if you're straight, if you don't understand, trans people, or you don't have a good idea of where they stand, I'd say go watch her YouTube channel. She brings common sense and calls out those people who are just ridiculous and who are predators. She makes the most valid points, and then you can see how the majority of trans people are, and what the trans community is really like, instead of this ideology, this idea of what you think it is. Because again, if you get your news from the right, trans people are these nutcases, and that's what you're going to hear, but that's not true. And if you're on the left, anybody who stands up against their ideology are transphobes, and that's not true. And so again, with the media the way it is, I'd say if you don't find someone who gives the news, who doesn't admit that they're biased, I don't listen to them. I honestly find my news from The Rising and from Kyle Kalinske, because I found, and both of them are on YouTube, I have found that they will call out to both the left and the right, and they will admit when they make mistakes. They also admit that they're biased to one side, and they'll say, but I'm biased to the side because of this. But if you can prove me wrong, I'll be happy to change my mind about it. And if you don't have people reporting the news like that, then all you're doing is getting propaganda.
Well, Kurt, here's what I'd say to you, and I'll tell you now. I'm a trans person. I am a transformationist.
You are.
Okay? I am. It's opening your mind, learning some new perspectives and thoughts, and transforming what you think and what you believe to something that actually makes sense. And you are a transformationist. I appreciate your perspective on the power's perspective of the whole trans discussion, from the left, from the right, and Bruce Jennifer Governor.
You mean Caitlyn Jenner? But I would not vote for Caitlyn, but it's not because she told the truth about trans athletes. Like I said, I'm not a fan of hers, but there's.
Well, here's what I'd say: you are not in California, nor am I. It's to the people.
Yeah, well, we
make a transformative.
I know right now everyone thinks that that anybody could do better than Gavin Newsom. So, they might vote for her just because of that. If it ends up, coming down to him.
You never know.
Never know. But
all right.
I appreciate the questions. I appreciate you being open-minded and asking some very poignant questions. And I hope that it helped clear things up.
It has.
Excellent. All right. Well, Ralph, thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Powers. Thank you for your perspective.
Bye.